Robert. Oop, this is John Bednar. Can you hear us?
I can now.
Good, thank you. That was our test.
Great, thanks.
Welcome everyone to our first forum hour of 2022. And as we begin, I'd like to ask Father Randy to open us with a prayer.
Morning. You here and you online. So I went looking for the prayer book. Often a good thing to do. I want to offer two columns. First is for knowledge of God's creation. Second is one called for conservation of natural resources. The Lord be with you. Let's pray. Almighty and everlasting God, you made the universe with all its marvelous order, atoms, worlds, and galaxies, the infinite complexity of living creatures. Grant that as we probe mysteries of your creation, we may come to know you more truly and more surely fulfill our role in your eternal purpose. In the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord. Mighty God, in giving us dominion over things on earth, you made us fellow workers in your creation. Give us wisdom and reverence, so use the resources of nature to no one may suffer from our abuse of it, that generations yet to come continue to praise you for your bounty. Jesus Christ, our Lord.
Thank you. On behalf of the Creation Care Ministry, thank you all for joining us in person and online for There's No Place Like Home. And I want to thank Lisa Clausen, who introduced the Creation Care team to Gary Gardner, our speaker here, and who suggested this forum. Thank you, Lisa. The topic this morning is an urgent one, focusing on ways faith communities are uniquely positioned to meet the challenges of sustainability as we face climate change on our home planet Earth. The format today will be our guest speaking for about 25 minutes, and then we'll open the discussion up for questions. We'll take in-person questions and also questions from online viewers as well. And as a reminder, if you are Zooming in, please mute yourself because it gets a little hard to hear if coffee cups are rattling or papers are rattling. So thank you. I have the privilege of introducing our guest speaker this morning. Gary Gardner is a researcher, writer, editor, and speaker on global sustainability issues. For more than 2 decades, he authored articles, papers, and books on sustainability challenges at the World Watch Institute and at Green Faith. Gary has authored several books, including The Earth Cries Out, How Faith Communities Meet the Challenges of Sustainability. He has spoken at global conferences sponsored by institutions ranging from the United Nations to the Vatican. Gary is currently an editor at the International Council on Clean Transportation. Would you join me in welcoming him?
Thank you very much, Denise. And a big thank you again to Lisa and Jim and Father Randy for the prayer. And to my wife, who takes good care of me. It is a real pleasure to be here with you today. We have known Immanuel sort of from the periphery for quite a while since we moved here in 2016 to Fairlington, so we're neighbors. And of course, we know Jim and Lisa as fellow bikers, and we see your church whenever we pass it regularly. It's great to be here with you today to get to know it a little more intimately and to get to know you as the community. So thank you for having me. In the movie Wizard of Oz, Dorothy had lost her way. She was far from Kansas. But Glinda, the Good Witch, gave her 5 words that delivered her from her crisis. What were those 5 words? Excellent. Thank you. What a great, great audience. Thank you. There's no place like home, and that is the theme today for my talk. My full talk, the full title of the talk is There's No Place Like Home, Embracing Faith and Earth in a Time of Crisis. So I'm going to be asking if there are ways that we might better come home to the earth and come home to our faith at this moment of ecological and social crisis in the world. We'll need to be learning to rethink our development model using a gospel lens. Just a little bit about myself. As Denise indicated, I was for more than 20 years at the World Watch Institute, which was a secular organization that did research and writing on global sustainability issues. And when I was there, I couldn't help but see a strong overlap between all of the issues from the sustainability agenda that we were looking at World Watch and Catholic social teaching. I was raised in the Catholic tradition. And I was just constantly amazed at that overlap, that whether we were talking about social justice or consumerism or the integral nature of all of the sustainability issues, that was all part of Catholic social teaching as well. So even though hardly anybody at World Watch was religious, I felt very much as though all of the writing I was doing at this secular organization was coming from a religious perspective. And then later, when I was at Green Faith, I was a consultant to them, where they were explicitly religious. It was really fun to be able to speak from a faith perspective about these issues of sustainability. And in the process, I learned that while the environment seemed like kind of a late coming issue in the Catholic Church anyway, it's not something that I grew up hearing about in the church at all, but there's actually a long tradition of teaching in the Christian tradition about the place of the environment and certainly social justice, of course. So Scripture, St. Francis, St. Bonaventure, more recently Teilhard de Chardin and Thomas Berry all speak about this intimate relationship between our faith and this planet that is our hopes, our cradle that supports us. And I realized in the process that people of faith actually add value to this movement towards sustainability. We, of course, have a large number of people that we can add to the movement, but we also add unique values. I'd just like to read from my book, by the way, this is the book that came out last year, The Earth Cries Out. And in there, I list why it is that faith groups have something special to offer. People of faith are organized into communities that meet regularly, are motivated and guided by a vigorous moral and spiritual energy, possess scriptural and other teachings that speak to sustainability issues, are heirs to a long tradition of engagement on social justice issues, understand and sometimes tap the power of prophetic voices, and act as an influential political force when we desire to, control meaningful amounts of investment capital, manage land and buildings that are potential sustainability showcases, possess the moral standing to address issues like consumerism that other groups avoid, are small enough to undertake low-risk social and economic experiments, and are large enough via linkages to other congregations to move the needle on sustainability issues. So we are not peripheral players in this sustainability movement. We have something powerful to offer, and in some cases, spiritual and moral dimensions, often something unique. So I want us to begin by coming from a place of pride and being aware, I think, of the potential that we have in this movement. So how is it that we return home? How is it that we come home to both the earth and to our faith? Well, the book is basically about stories of how that can happen for us. And I'd like to start, because I'm somewhat aware of some of the initiatives that you have going, I'd like to start with the energy realm. And of course, we know that throughout the history of humanity, when we transitioned from people who were hunters and gatherers to later agriculturalists to industrial people, that was really a transition of energy. Really, we found more and more powerful ways to harness energy in each of those stages. And the problem, though, is that in this last stage, where we become quite powerful, overly powerful in some regards, we're also using an energy source that really is not good for our planet and particularly for the climate. So we have a problem. We need to transition away from fossil fuels and into renewable energy. And you all are doing that, as I understand it. I understand the solar panels will be arriving imminently. That's very, very exciting. Very glad to see that happening. The story that I used in my book about an energy transition was one, and as all of the stories in the book, is one that tries to tap the integral nature of the challenge in front of us. So in the Catholic tradition, when we talk about integral human development, for example, it's not just about increasing income. It's not just about providing jobs. It's a whole array of economic, and social, and moral, and spiritual pieces that are really what development is about. So I was really inspired to hear about an example in Washington, D.C. of the Archdiocese of Washington that had this 17-acre plot of land on which they had a home for homeless people. That was run by the Sisters of Charity of Mother Teresa's group. And it still exists, but it was kind of run down and it wasn't well taken care of. And the land was largely idle. And so the diocese said, how can we use this land more sustainably? Sustainably in terms of environment, but also social issues. And they went to a group called Catholic Energies, which is part of Catholic Climate Fund. And that group came up with an interesting plan for them so that they installed solar panels on 5 of the 17 acres in this plot of land. And of course, that's an environmental advance, right? That's good for the environment to be generating solar energy. But it was also really good in terms of the finances because there were dollar savings that went to help maintain the shelter and that provide funds for the mission of the Archdiocese, for Catholic charities, so that their budget, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars that was generated because they didn't have to pay for fossil fuel energy any longer. So there was a financial savings. There was also a social impact. The excess energy that the panels were generating was given to a nonprofit that helps people with energy for low-income families. And of course, there was the environmental impact, not just the fact that we're generating solar energy, but also that land was planted with 100 trees and a meadow. You can imagine in many urban areas, if you had a solar farm, there would be gravel all around. Well, here there was a meadow that was meant to be a home to butterflies and bird species to help them to thrive. So the integral piece was important because it wasn't just the environmental piece, it was also financial and social dimensions as well. And the way, I was very much taken in my research over the last many years with St. Francis and the way that St. Francis really had this intimate relationship with nature. He would talk about brother sun and sister moon. This wasn't merely poetry for him. This was a deep-seated feeling of connection to nature. And so I wondered, how would St. Francis, if he saw the project in Washington, how might he describe this in the same kind of poetic way that he used in the Catechol of Creation? And I think it would go something like this. Praise be to you, Lord, who brother sun, who showers us with abundant energy, who frees up riches to tend to our homeless and ill brothers and sisters, who inspires us to live in harmony with the rest of your creation, whose generosity teaches us to share with those who have not, who warms and nurtures the wildlife and beauty that surrounds us, who reminds us endlessly of your goodness. So you may already be doing this, but you may want to think about your solar panels not just as a technical piece of hardware, but something that is bringing you closer to God through nature and through the neighbors that you serve. So that's on the energy front. I also understand that you're interested in developing your garden in a new way, which is wonderful. There's a chapter on land in the book as well. And let me just start with a little bit of the bad news. I wouldn't be from World Watch if I didn't give you a little bit of doom and gloom statistic. As you've probably heard, and this is probably the single most stunning statistic I've run across in more than 20 years. that we are living in the sixth mass extinction in the history of this planet. First one caused by human beings. That is stunning. If we think of ourselves as heirs to this creation, we think of ourselves as co-creators with God. How have we done in that job as co-creators? One could argue that we need to do a much better job. There are other studies that talk about, or for example, the Living Planet Index that talks about how populations of monitored mammals, amphibians, birds, reptiles, so there are these different groups of these around the world that have been monitored for the last 46 years. Those populations in those monitored groups have fallen by 68%. So these are species that are disappearing. And if that's too abstract, those data are too abstract, try the windshield test. Think about taking a cross-country trip when you were a child in the summer. And you would arrive wherever it was a few hours away, and the windshield would be just covered with mosquitoes and gnats and other insects. How many of us experience that today? It's just not nearly as much of an issue. It's a wonderful issue when we were kids. But it's not nearly as present today because of what some people are calling the insect apocalypse. So it's important that we learn to take care of the land around us, because in taking care of the land, we're taking care of species as well. So what can we do? Well, obviously, a very important piece is to be thinking about native species in gardens, because native species really host a wide variety of biodiversity. It's very important for biodiversity. There's a biologist, Doug Palamy, who has written that in the eastern United States, oaks are home to 534 caterpillars. But ginkgo trees, which are non-native, oaks are native, ginkgo trees are not, ginkgo trees are home to one caterpillar species. And he drives the point home by saying, we might write caterpillars, but I'm really talking about bird food. This is bird food. So you can imagine 534 different kinds of bird food are going to attract many more birds. And those birds, for them to thrive and for their offspring to thrive, they need insects to feed to offspring. And those insects are more likely to thrive when you have layers of native species. So you have mulch and bushes and trees. So it's important to think ecologically when we think about our gardens, so that we are supporting habitat. There may be another way to think about this. I'm not sure how it would work for you as part of the Episcopal family. But there's a Catholic group called Goodlands that is mapping all Catholic properties across the world, which I have to tell you is a lot. And the question that they're asking is, how might this property be managed better from an ecological perspective and more intelligently to support our social mission? So Molly Burns, who started this group up in Connecticut, imagines a map of, for example, dioceses in Africa, overlaid with a map of deforestation, overlaid with a map of Catholic or Episcopal health clinics. And where deforestation is happening at that edge between the forest and encroaching humanity, that is often where pandemics can breed. And so the question is, you might be able to stop a pandemic if you're aware of the properties and if you're managing properties correctly. That's obviously a much bigger project, but maybe something to think about how your garden could be connected in a necklace of relationships to gardens throughout the region, whether faith-based gardens or gardens of any kind. I wanted also to, the book is divided into two parts, the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, which is a phrase that Pope Francis uses a lot in his encyclical Laudato Si, that we need to be concerned about the earth. We also need to be particularly concerned about people who are poor. And so the two examples I've given you from about gardens and energy come from the Cry of the Earth section, but there's an inspiring example from the Cry of the Poor as well that I wanted to tell you about, and especially because it features an Episcopal priest. There's an organization in Nashville called Thistle Farms, and it was founded by a woman, Becca Stevens, an Episcopal priest, who was very concerned about healing and very interested in healing because she herself was abused as a young woman. And so she wanted to help women in Nashville who were suffering from drug addiction or abuse. And so she set up this firm, this social enterprise, and that's the key to this particular chapter, is about businesses that bring together the need to make money with the need for a social and environmental purpose. So her purpose is to help heal. She started this company that makes candles and lotions and oils and helps women across the country who are stressed, want to heal in that way. But it's also healing because she's giving jobs to the women in Nashville who are working at the factory that makes these candles and lotions. And I think 68% or so of the management of the company are those women. But she, again, in an integral way, she's thinking beyond the immediate project that she's setting up. She's thinking also about women across the country, because Nashville is not unique in having abused women and women who are drug addicts, women who need healing. So she set up a program where in 50 cities across the country, they are replicating the model that is used at the Thistle Farms company in Nashville. So that healing project is spreading. But she's also thinking about the earth. And she sources all of her materials, all the materials for candles and lotions, from sustainable sources. And she's thinking about women overseas who need healing as well, women in impoverished countries. And a lot of the goods that she produces, or some of the goods that she buys, come from poor people who are in other countries. So, again, integral. She's thinking about not just the immediate social need. She was thinking environmentally. She was thinking in terms of ending poverty as well. Really a wonderful, wonderful example. I also, because it's one of my favorite topics, my wife will tell you, between the Cry of the Earth and the Cry of the Poor, there's a chapter on consumerism, because I think consumerism is the topic on which people of faith have the most to offer, I would say. And yet it's the one in which we're least willing, it seems, to step up. And there's a lot of church teachings about the problems that come about when you're too attached to the material world. You're too attached to consumption. And yet, I think it's probably fair to say that if you look in our garbage cans or many aspects of our lives, you would find that most of us, as people of faith, don't live that much differently from the rest of society. And I find real inspiration, I think, from the Amish and the way that they take seriously their faith values and their consumption values. Now, I am not at all saying that we need to live like the Amish, but we do, I think we are challenged to live in as dedicated a way to our values as the Amish do. We think of the Amish as people who don't use modern technologies, and that's not true. That's not quite true. They will use electricity, but only as much as comes from a 12-volt battery. Why? Why limit it to that? Because anymore, if you hook up to the grid, you start getting involved in all sorts of consumer activities that they believe tears their community apart. So a prime value for them is to keep the community together, to keep the family together. And they insist on that. They will look at a new technology, it'll be adopted by early adopters, and then the bishops, after many years, will meet and they will talk about, is this technology bringing us together, or is it tearing us apart? And I just think that's a wonderful, wonderful example for us. The chapter in the book that deals with this opens with the story of tourists who are visiting Amish country, and they're on a bus, and one of the Amish is invited onto the bus, and the tourists ask him, "How are you different from us?" And the Amish man turns it back on them and says, "How many of you own a television?" They all raise their hand. He says, "How many of you think that television maybe is not good for you and is not good for your family?" And most of them raise their hands. He said, "How many of you are going to go home today and sell your television?" Nobody raised their hands. And I think that just drives home how this particular group, I think, takes those values seriously. And in our lives today, I think in this sustainability emergency, which is really asking us to live differently, to embrace the purpose of life in a different way than we've been taught to. Not that everything that we've grown up with was bad. I mean, there's been a lot of wonderful advances. But it is challenging us, I think, to think about how can we live in harmony with the earth? How can we live so that all of these goods that we relish are shared? You know, if the 20th century was a century of tremendous technological advance, could the 21st century be a century of tremendous social advance, where we learn to share, where we learn to live in peace and equity with everybody around us? So that's what coming home means for me. It's about living within the limits that the earth has taught us. And it's also about coming home to our faith, because all of these answers are in our scriptures. They're in the Gospels. Even though the Gospels were written thousands of years ago, those answers are there for us. And I think it's a question of us taking our own faith teachings seriously, acting as though we were Christians. I'll stop there. Come home, come to earth, come to your faith tradition. Thank you very much. Jim. Yeah, you know, I was searching for a model to point to in the book, and I settled on, you know, mostly because it came across my desk easily and was local, and I could go and talk to people there. St. John Newman in Reston, which is a parish that in 2015 heard about Laudato Si, the encyclical, and they said, how can we become involved in this? How can we advance this encyclical's teachings? And they have just visit their website at SJN, I think it is. I'm not sure what it is. St. John Newman in Reston. You just visit their website, you'll see that they have activities going on all the time, and they divide them into 4 groups: spiritual activities, advocacy, sustainability, and education. And so they're constantly, every month, they have a new kind of program that's being enrolled and featured. And they, like you, are about to put solar panels on their I would also say that there are a number of Catholic churches that have joined together in the diocese to advance this agenda. And I would not be surprised if the same is true in the Episcopal Church as well. And so, you know, having other faith communities that are walking the same road can be very inspirational and can give you a lot of encouragement and can help to share best practices and success stories. So yeah, they're out there. Sure. Yeah, thank you. So the question was, how did I get inspired to make this a life work? And I think initially, so I was raised, in a religious household and have always had, that's always been my framework. And I'm very comfortable with that. But I was just amazed when I learned about sustainability around 1990, and was just amazed at how sweeping the issues were, the number of issues, the interconnection of those issues, the seriousness of those issues. It just blew me away. It was unlike any other issue that I had read about growing up as a kid. There's hungry people in Africa, yes, we should help them. And that seemed like a big problem, but a solvable problem. This felt like something that was new and huge and almost overwhelming. And yet, at the same time, as a person of faith, it was a challenge. It was, okay, this is what we're facing. This is what we have. We also have a core set of scriptures and teachings on ethics and morality, inspirational gospel stories. How can we apply those to this problem? So that was always a part of my thinking. And as I said at the outset, when I was working at World Watch, I couldn't get past the idea that most of the issues we were talking about were in some way issues that I thought the church would care about as well. And consumerism was a great example of that. That we would talk about it a little bit at World Watch. It wasn't in a lot of environmental organizations. There wasn't a lot of talk about consumerism because it's not that well received often. But it felt to me like it was a central issue, and it was something that the church had been talking about for a long time. So to me, it was the seeds of the faith sustainability connection were there from very early on, and that just inspired me all the more to want to make this my life's work. Yes, sir. So the question was, any insight, there's no insight here, by the way, about why it is that so many conservative Christians seem to support climate change deniers. And, I'm sure there are many answers to that. One would be the media environment in which we live, where we're all siloed. We get our news from sources that are comfortable to us. And I think a lot of conservative Christians get their news from conservative outlets that convey that message that climate crisis is not real. So that would be a piece of it. I don't think there's anything inherently in a more conservative Christian perspective that means that you would not believe that we are damaging the earth. I don't think that necessarily follows at all. And in fact, there are some evangelical leaders who are very good about the whole sustainability problem and speaking out about it. Catherine Hayhoe, who you're probably familiar with, is a climate scientist in Texas who speaks about this from a faith perspective. She's an evangelical climate scientist. But there have been others as well. There was the Evangelical Environmental Network many years ago was talking about these issues in the 1990s. So it's not necessarily the case that conservative Christians would not be on board with this. And I think it's also, this is probably a larger question around how do we bridge this divide in our society, which has to do, I think, in part, and this is hard, with taking the other side seriously, listening to them as though they were not crazy people. You know, I'm not saying they are crazy people. I'm just saying that to have the mindset that they are coming at their worldview as sincerely as you and I come at ours. And starting from that position, I think, can lead to dialogue and can help to overcome some of the hesitation. Say again. The point was that there don't seem to be many opportunities for dialogue, and I understand that, but I do wonder, if we made an effort, that were a concerted effort on our part, that maybe we would find that we have more to talk about than we thought. I think I've seen a lot of stories just in the news and generally about focus groups that bring together conservatives and liberal people, and what an enlightenment it is for them to have a conversation and to come away not necessarily persuaded by the other side, but to understand that the other side is normal people who have, for whatever reason, developed different opinions. And I think, as Christians in particular, I think that's a real challenge to us, because we are meant to be one. Well, one. That's a big ethos of Christianity. But it might be a project as sort of a sub-project of our ecological project. So the point was that people, even in this community, in talking about your solar panel project, would come at it from different perspectives and have different reasons for pursuing it. And yeah, I think we meet people where they are, and we help each other along. Say the name of the group again. Earth Optimism. So the question was, did I know anything about Earth Optimism and what did I think of it? And I don't. And I don't, so I can't comment on that. But I'll just say in general that I think I like to think of myself as an optimistic person and want, a future that's bright for all of us. I think that sometimes that optimism gets confused with technological advance, that technological advance will always make us better. And I think that's just clearly not true. It's not 100% true that technological advance always makes us better. So to the degree that optimism is rooted in technological advance, I would question it. But that doesn't mean that we don't need technological advance. We certainly do. The solar panels are technological advance. More efficient systems are technological advance. But one of the points that I make here and in another book that I've written is that a lot of times we reduce the problem to a question of efficiency, that we need to be more efficient in our use of resources. Let me clearly say we need to be more efficient in our use of resources. But if we stop there, that can backfire. If you get a more fuel-efficient car, and you save a bunch of money on gas, and then use that money to fly to the Caribbean for a beach vacation, you may end up having more carbon emissions than if you had not had the more efficient car. So in addition to efficiency, we need conservation. As Anthony Rudin, who runs an interfaith energy outfit, says, the solution to a lot of this is off. Turn things off. Don't drive as much. Don't fly as much. Yes, we want to be more efficient. And yes, that will allow us more opportunities. But don't take advantage of those opportunities to the point that they undercut your initial motivation. So that's as much as I would say about optimism. Catherine, sorry. So do I need to repeat it? Sure. So the question was, over the course of my work, have I seen progress, and are people more likely to engage these issues now? Both in terms of our practice and in terms of our ability to talk about these issues. Definitely progress, awfully slow, I have to say. I mean, Sally will tell you how many times I come home and I just say, I'm so annoyed that people are just discovering that all these things that we wrote about in the 1990s, hey, they're true, and they're impacting us, and these fires and the floods and all of this that scientists were telling us, decades ago were coming, have come and are going to continue to come in a worse way. So, but more and more people recognize that now. What is a little bit dispiriting is that it doesn't necessarily seem to be motivating the kind of action that we need. And I think a lot of people just feel discouraged, like, what can I do? This is just way too big, way too large a problem. And for me, as a Christian, it's a wonderful opportunity. It's a wonderful opportunity. If we have a civilizational crisis, a civilizational emergency, a problem that is indicting the way that we have set up our systems, isn't that also a civilizational opportunity, a civilizational chance for us to remake the way we think about our economies, to remake the way that we transport ourselves, to remake the way that we eat, to really establish a new civilization with a new set of abiding, guiding ethics. And that's what I think people of faith can offer. We can offer leadership there, because you and I both know that you're not going to hear an ad today or tomorrow or in the next 10 years, or I suspect ever, if we're under this current system, that says, oh, why don't you not buy my product? Because that's maybe not a good idea. It is up to us, I think, to show leadership on these issues. And these are difficult issues. But what I also find inspiring is that I think that Jesus promises us a happier life if we embrace the gospel values. We may not have as much stuff, but we may have more friends. We may not be, taking vacations everywhere that we'd like to. We may limit those to a few that are really meaningful. And we may spend more time on our front porch playing the guitar with neighbors. It seems to me that there's an offering here that people of faith can be witnesses to and can live if we can show how our lives can be better in a simpler way that is more in tune with the natural environment. Other end. So the question was that I guess Father Randy grew up in a rural area where people were concerned about each other's land and how it was being used because it affected everybody. And his question was, how do we get to a point where we are taking seriously the needs and concerns of people, of blue-collar workers, whether they're farmers or laborers or what have you. I think that's a really interesting question that we need to do a lot more thinking about. And you see it a lot in our politics today, I think, where people are trying to figure that out. There's this blue-green alliance that they talk about, where blue being blue collar, green being environmentalists, and how we need to come together to tackle these problems. There are some interesting challenges. They say that in an electric car, there are many fewer parts. It's going to take much less assembly time. It's going to require less labor. So labor unions are a little bit concerned about the transition to electric cars. How are we going to bridge that concern? I think that has to be a priority. That it is where the integral piece comes in, where we can't just focus on the cleanliness, the fact that it doesn't pollute of an electric car. You need to focus on that larger social picture that surrounds the electric car. I think people are working on that, but it doesn't seem to have gelled. Solved everything, didn't it? Thank you very much. I'm just going to pivot off of that to the whole question of Lent, giving things up, and an experience that I and Sally have had over the last 2 months. We entered the new year thinking that we were going to eat less meat, because I'm well aware of the climate impact of meat. But I like meat. And the question was, and this has been a question for me for a long, long time. And I would tell myself, I eat less meat than I did as I was growing up. I think that's objectively true. But I could cut back a lot more. And so we were doing it for, questions of health and all of that. But I found in the end, we have not had, we've probably had maybe 3 meals with meat since January 3rd. We did not give up meat. We embrace plant-based diets. And that is a huge difference. I have fallen in love with cooking. I love to chop vegetables. I didn't know I loved to chop vegetables. I didn't know that if you told me on December 31st that I was going to be a vegetable chopper, I would have said, you're crazy, I can't cook. I am in love with the whole process, and it's a spiritual activity. I look at those carrots, I look at those onions, and I where did you come from? Look at you, garlic, look at the packaging, the natural packaging you come in. It's wonderful, it is wonderful. And I thank God, just the way that St. Francis would praise God through Brother Sun, I praise God through Brother Garlic and Sister Carrot. And the food has been magnificent. And I have not missed meat one iota of it, or hardly at all. And the sort of the program we're following allows you to have meat once in a while. I'm fine with that. Okay. But the point was, it was by embracing it and finding God in it and finding that it was a way for me to become more grounded in this earth that supports me. It was in doing that I got to know me, not from a perspective of, oh, I shouldn't eat meat. should wasn't there. It was just enjoying life. So I thank you for mentioning Lent. That's where that came from. Certainly, in terms of our energy use, we have signed up with Arcadia, yeah, that that gets our energy essentially from wind. So that's a big piece for us. But it's through Dominion, but it is supporting the advance of wind projects elsewhere, essentially. We bought a better mileage car. We keep the thermostat down. We try wherever possible, I think, not as much as I would like, but we excuse me, we try to limit the amount of material that comes into the house. So, for example, we're big fans of seltzer water, but we don't buy seltzer cans anymore. We have one for fix your own water. So we've eliminated all those cans, and we try to think about all products in that way. You know, there's some when you buy detergent, you're buying a lot of water, typically, and that's a lot of weight to transport. Eliminate all that if you just buy the material that's needed for you to add water to it and make your own. So things like that are helpful. And then, you know, the other benefit I think of this change in diet is less waste. Much less waste. There was a New Yorker cartoon that talked about the vegetable crisper as a place where good intentions go to die. I'm telling you, that was certainly the case in our house. You know, I'd buy these vegetables at the grocery store and then wouldn't quite get around to them. And next thing I know, we've got science experiments going on. And now, I mean, to the point that we put the vegetables in the door of the refrigerator so that we can see them. And they're the things we use most anyway. So we can see what we're running out of or what we're not attending to, and we eat that. We just don't waste food. If food waste were a nation, it would be the third largest source of greenhouse gases. It's carbon, third largest source of carbon dioxide. But it's a huge part of the problem. So I'm just so happy that in our little way, we are contributing less to food waste. So that's just another. We bike a lot. I bike to work. That's, so you were making the comment that there's a lot of pieces in the book that talk about the way things are integrated, the impacts of one part of our life affecting the other parts of our life. And I would say that's another way of coming home. You know, we are coming home to I mentioned that we're all one in Christ. That's coming home to our faith and embracing that, realizing that. Coming home to the earth is realizing that everything is connected. Everything is interconnected. So all of this holistic, wholesome kind of worldview, I think that we're offered in the sustainability crisis is just wonderful. It's life-giving on so many dimensions. Thank you. So it's an excellent comment that in the moment, what seems really important and very gratifying will not matter in the long run. So a comment that in 20 years she may not remember that she needed help, that she needed to buy this or that thing or have this or that experience. I think it's really good. I often ask the question, is this making my life better? Or is it going to be another thing that I need to manage? You know, it's going to cost me money, to maybe put me in debt, something I have to manage at home. Wouldn't I feel freer if I didn't have to worry about it? I love the long-term perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I just want to wrap up with a couple of comments. First of all, thanking you for the perspective, which is so hopeful and positive, a great way to send all of us out for the day. And I also wanted to remind you that the Creation Care Ministry has a monthly meeting. So of things we discuss here, we are discussing and creating, hopefully creating meaningful opportunities for all of us here. The next Creation Care meeting is Tuesday, March 1st at 7:30, and we do it all via Zoom. So if you wish to participate and begin to join us and help us craft our way that's meaningful for Immanuel, please join us. You can email me and I'll send you the Zoom link so that you can attend. I also wanted to share something that part of the Creation Care team is also doing right now is we are participating, particularly Sarah Glasgow and I are participating in the Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions. That is an incredibly powerful organization that has brought probably 365 different churches in the Northern Virginia, parts of Maryland and DC area together in ways that Gary was talking about today. So this is something that I'm very excited about, finding opportunities to link with local churches that we can all make a difference together. But I am amazed at the energy, the expertise, the knowledge, and the will to work together as faith community on this issue. So we will keep you informed on the Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions. And the last thing is, if you live in the city of Alexandria, the Alexandria City's Climate Change Action Plan Public Workshop, also on Tuesday, March 1st. And if you're interested in attending, that's at 7 o'clock, and you'll see what they're doing citywide. And that's very helpful too. I can send you the link, just email me and I can send you that information. We're happy to follow up. That's it for me. And I am so glad to see you all here today. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night. You all.